My biggest concern, or maybe my biggest fear for Wuthering Waves, is that I hope that it doesn't get too hyped, because I feel like we're in a spot where we've seen a lot of great changes and a lot of great things, especially like story, combat, some of the QTE stuff, you know, the ecosystem, and it's really exciting to see all that stuff. But I'm starting to see a lot of the community getting extremely hyped to the point where maybe expectations are being pushed to kind of unfair levels, is kind of the way I'll say it, because I feel like the hype for it, while Kiro's cooking up some massive stuff and I think it's really good, you get to a point where if you go beyond expectations, or you go beyond like what they can kind of polish in a game for launch, I feel like you kind of get in a point where maybe you get disappointed or something. And I'm afraid a lot of people might end up in that camp where they're like, oh, I'm kind of disappointed because I thought it was going to be this, that, and this, and whatever. And it's like they set such a high expectation bar that it's like, I don't know if they can do that. You know, I think having like a neutral kind of like level-minded set going into launch is kind of the most best thing for us, because, you know, obviously it's a live service game. It's going to be something that can be built upon. So if they have a really good foundation, which obviously they're trying to curate that and they're trying to make that, I think we'll be set for a really good time. But anybody who's like thinking that it's going to be the next whatever, I feel like that's a lot of pressure to push it. And I feel like it's another kind of thing that you're putting into a lane that's kind of unfortunate for Wuthering Waves, because it doesn't necessarily market itself as like the next, you know, Genshin or whatever. It's just kind of doing its own thing. And I think it needs to grow organically. Now, if it does end up going toe to toe with Genshin or competing, that's great. I mean, that's great for both games and it ends up working out. But I don't think it should be the expectation from the rip that it needs to be that. It just needs to focus on being really great, and Kiro needs to invest on making it really great, and then it can become whatever it needs to be naturally, whether that is going toe to toe with Genshin, carving out some sort of like, you know, spot for itself, and where it can kind of grow organically and just be its own presence, which I really think that's what I hope that it does. And I hope that the community lets it do that. And I really just think the expectations for the game are hopefully starting to level out. Like, obviously we know Kiro can cook, PGR is fantastic, but we also just have to expect that this is going to be a live service game that can make adjustments, they can make changes, you know. So I mean, that's just one of the biggest things that, you know, people get so hyped on stuff, especially new stuff, and, you know, the market's been so stale for so long, and Kiro coming in with that dev interview and just showing us like what it takes to communicate with the community, and then it just all of a sudden it's like, wow, somebody gave us something for a little bit, and then expectations can skyrocket from there. And I feel like it just ends up being like this whirlwind of pressure, especially for Kiro, because you can already kind of tell that they're pressured on some stuff, which makes sense. You know, if you got critiques and you got feedback, there are reasons for, you know, pressure and to kind of change as a developer. But we also don't want to make them think that they're making a bad product when they have insanely good foundation and they're really good, you know, what they're doing and trying to build and trying to do stuff. Because I feel like them as a dev is just working on trying to make the best game they can for us as a community, and I really feel like that's probably what should happen. This should be the best case scenario for us, and we should accept that. And then if it becomes something bigger or greater or whatever, obviously that'd be really great for us as well. But that's kind of a, you know, my little spill on Wuthering Waves. I feel like everything else I'm pretty happy with. I think the fact that they're rewriting the story is really cool. Combat looks phenomenal. Is already really good in CBT1. The redesigns are also really good, and I think they're heading into a nice little pace for what they think for stylization. But I'm just really scared that people's expectations or hype is ultimately going to be like the downfall of kind of the launch, or maybe even like going into launch, that people have too high of expectations, and that's going to make people salty for no reason. So I just hope everybody levels them out, especially if CBT2 kind of shows us what some of the glimpses of the foundation looks like. I think then people will be a little bit more leveled out.